Thank you for joining us this evening. Welcome to everyone who's joined this amazing broadcast this evening. We are excited to be here, excited to be partnered with Wiatica. We are all looking forward to the return of Carnival this year and all the exciting things that Wiatica will be bringing us this Carnival season. We want to say hello to everyone in the Caribbean community. We want to say Happy Caribbean Heritage Month. We want to say welcome to everyone who has joined us this evening and thank you. As we go through the evening and this presentation, if you have questions, feel free to post those questions in our chat. We will be answering your questions live on the air, and we encourage you to ask whatever you like. This is your opportunity to post questions and talk to the attorneys without any cost involved, right? So here we are. Today's presentation is brought to you by Wiatica in partnership with Caribbean Legal Solutions. My name is Renee Kendall, and I'm an attorney. I am based here in New York, and I'm also the founding partner for Caribbean Legal Solutions. We founded our company a couple years ago to connect Caribbean communities around the world to legal resources, realizing that our key clientele would have legal matters that were transnational. We sought to create a network of attorneys that span the globe. So we help our clients with their legal matters based here in New York and also with their legal matters based in the Caribbean. Today I am joined by my colleague, Jameelah Tucker. Jameelah is going to walk us through the key tips for starting a business in New York. Jameelah?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. Wiatica, thank you for having me. I am the managing partner at the law office of Jameelah H. Tucker, PLLC. We provide legal solutions and legal advice and general counsel services to individuals and evolving and emerging brands. We also provide risk assessment and some civil litigation here in the corporate and intellectual property fields. So today we are going to touch on some guidelines, some points that you should know when starting and or evolving a business here in the state of New York. And we hope that we are able to just give you some insight into some areas that you weren't thinking about, and or if you already do, it just give you some more information. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jameelah. So before we get started, I want to ask, how long have you been providing counsel to businesses?
Oh, since about 2015. One of the things that I noticed in my community and with individuals and new clients at the time was everyone finds an attorney when they're being sued or they need to sue someone. And many of our businesses were missing out on the internal general counsel side that many large corporations and organizations have, and they were missing out on the risk assessment side of the legal practice. It's, most of these companies have in-house counsel and or a general counsel or a legal team. So I wanted to be able to provide small businesses, evolving and emerging brands and individuals that same level of business insight without necessarily them having to deal with larger firms that they may or may not be at that level yet when it comes to revenue and cycles.
Okay, great. So Jameelah, tell me, I live in New York. I run a small business. I decided I'm going to start a new business. It's a small business. It may just be me. What's the first thing you would advise me to do as an attorney?
As an attorney, one of the biggest things that we talk to our clients about are the types of goods and services they want to provide, knowing what you are giving or want to place into the commerce or in the market, the names that you are thinking of. We always want to think about branding in the beginning stages so that we can decide what to search and what to research. But one of the biggest and most important areas is the type of entity you want to start, whether or not you want to be a sole proprietor, a partnership, a corporation, or a limited liability company, which we'll touch on today what each one of those are. We want to make sure that you have the best structure in place for your business, especially when dealing with longevity. Not everybody wants to keep a business for the rest of their life. Some may want to have it for a few years and be able to sell, or depending on the goods and services they have. So we want to make sure that you pick the best entity that will fit the structure of your business and the possible tax concerns that you may have.
Okay, so you mentioned the words business entity, and some of our audience may not be familiar with that term. Do you want to tell us what that is and what we should be thinking about when we hear that term?
Sure. The government, the United States government, has classified 4 different types of entities, and what this really means is your business speaks as an individual or not, or it's either a part of you or it's separate and apart from you. And so entities are basically the types of structure that you are thinking of having for your business and where in which liability or assets may fall regarding that entity.
Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about the different types of entities that exist if I wanted to start a new business?
Sure. We have 4 different types. We have a sole proprietorship, we have a general partnership, we have a corporation, and we have a limited liability company for the 4 main for-profit entity types. We also have a non-for-profit, which I'm sure many people are familiar with, especially if you do a lot of community work.
Mm-hmm.
And then one that we will also add in and talk about today is the public benefit corporation.
Okay. So how about we start by talking a little bit about a sole proprietorship. What is that?
So a sole proprietorship is a business that is entirely owned by an individual. It is not separate and apart from that individual. You might see people possibly doing business as, sometimes you'll see DBAs, but the company or the entity and the individual usually share a social security number. All money comes through that one individual. It's really what is the base level of a lot of individuals or a lot of companies starting out. You have a product, you have a service, it's just you. You haven't really put separate bank accounts together, you haven't done anything like that. Money is coming in and going out through you and only you. And that is really what a sole proprietorship is. It is a sole prop. One of the main areas that we notice with sole proprietorship is you are responsible for the liabilities and the assets of that company, because really your business is just an extension of you. If this is you, your hand is your business, your arm is you. That's how we see it with a sole proprietorship.
Got it. Are there other types?
Yes. So there's also a general partnership. A general partnership is a group of individuals who have decided to be agents of one another. So they are creating an entity where each individual, you and me here, can speak for each other and for the business. So usually, depending on how your structure is, it is either each individual will have equity ownership, or they will have ownership in the business either 50-50, or you may change that with a partnership agreement and decide whether or not those percentages will change, either 60-40, 70-30, however you decide that you want to do that. There are 2 types of partnerships. There is a general partnership organization where both individuals are general partners, or you can have one general partner and one limited partner, which usually means they're giving money and that's great, and they want to kind of not have to deal with the management overall of the business. The day-to-day management is really what it is. That's what the general partner will do.
Might some of our audience hear of a limited partner, sort of like a silent partner?
They can be, depending on how you draft your partnership agreement, but really under a partnership, what it looks like is each individual is responsible in comparison to their ownership amount, right? So whatever that percentage, they're responsible for the profits, losses, liabilities, and assets in proportion to their ownership share of that business. But yes, you can draft a silent partner agreement in your partnership agreement, and you are able to decide how you want to do that.
Okay. And you also talked a little bit about a corporation. How does that work?
So corporations, I'm sure we have all seen other companies, but one of the biggest things about corporations is their structure. A corporation is a legal entity that is separate and apart from the individuals who make up that company. So the great thing that everybody loves about a corporation is what is known as limited liability. The company in and of itself is responsible for the debts and profits and everything like that of the company. The limited liability means that the individuals who make up that corporation are not responsible for the debts and liabilities and assets of a company. So if you put something under the name of the company, ABC Corp, and you bought a car and the car is owned by ABC Corp, if somebody were to try and deal with the corporation to get back the car, the most they'd be able to do is go after the car. Not from the personal bank accounts of you or I or somebody else that makes it up. That is one of the benefits. The difficulties with a corporation is corporations are known as what is double taxed. When money comes in, they are taxed on the money that comes into the business. And then, of course, a corporation can decide to give dividends, right? You've heard about payments, right? You own shares in a company, you are paid in proportion possibly to those shares. And if you receive dividends from those shares, you as an individual are then taxed on the individual share, revenue or profits that you get from that. But the corporation structure is done through, we've seen them with the stock market, we've seen them with other types of bonds or assets and everything like that. Companies exist, they give shares in the company in exchange for money, and that is where you see that corporate structure. Because they are exchanging corporate assets or company shares for money, you see a lot more structure. New York State is very clear about a lot more structure. Usually you are required to have board members of at least 3 individuals, but that's where you start to see boards, you start to see directors and officers, you'll start to see a larger set of breakdowns with a more formalized structure than a partnership or, again, a sole prop.
So when we're thinking of corporations, I think many people think of corporations as large organizations. We're talking Amazon and Google and Apple. These are corporations, and we're thinking about the stock market. But can a small business or a single person establish a corporation?
So a single person, no. You need a group of individuals, at least 3. But you can have what is known as a privately held corporation. They can be small. The Amazons, the Apples, the Microsofts that we discussed, those are publicly held corporations. So obviously you as a person in the world can buy shares in Apple and buy shares in Amazon, and you will then own a piece of that company. Whereas a smaller organization or a privately held company may decide to only give shares or only sell shares to a small group of people, and that can exist as well. You can be a corporation even if you are small. It is just a matter of which type of structure, business structure works best for you in a tax perspective. And I always tell everybody, when you're thinking about an entity type, you should always be thinking about your accountant based upon where you live, based upon the types of goods and services that you have, that your accountant will be able to tell you which type of entity structure is best for you.
Great. So I want to talk a little bit about the limited liability company, the LLCs, as folks might know it. This is a type of entity I think many people are familiar with, but maybe not so familiar. Can you describe it to us from a legal perspective?
One of the LLC is something that so many corporations, so many individuals also love, because the LLC gives you the limited liability of a corporation with the flexibility and the maneuvering of a partnership. So you get the benefit of kind of both worlds. When it's a little bit easier in terms of the corporate structure, it is not as formalized. You do have to still file articles of organization with our state, and we will talk about that a little later in the presentation about the paperwork that you need to do. But what happens is, again, the limited liability company, is considered separate and apart from its members. So when in a corporation you have shareholders, in an LLC you have what is known as members. The operating agreement that is designed for an LLC then will dictate, and is very similar to the partnership agreement that we talked about earlier, where you can contract and make decisions about how your company will run, and what official actions will need to be taken, everything from annual meetings to how you divide shares and capital contributions and other things of that nature. So it's a great flexible option, and you can have a single member LLC, and it is known as a disregarded entity if that is the case. So one person can create an LLC, whereas with a corporation you couldn't. But you still get the benefit of the limited liability, and there are other tax parameters that go around there. But again, it is a structure that many like for the fact of the ease in which it is to set up, and the flexibility in which they can operate in an informal setting, but also how they can grow. If you are a smaller business and you still want to be separate, you want an entity that's separate and apart from you, you want to protect your own personal assets, the LLC is something that you should definitely look into.
So in thinking a little bit more about LLCs, we've seen it used, and we may think about it for businesses, for commerce, but I've heard of people using LLCs to purchase property or to hold property under an entity organized as an LLC. Are there any particular advantages to doing so?
It depends on your tax situation. So one of the best things, again, like corporations and LLCs, even though they are separate and apart, they are an individual according to the government and according to law. So they can purchase, they can enter into contract, they can provide services, they can provide goods, they can house everything. So when you're talking about property, yes, an LLC or a corporation can purchase property. It would be under the EIN of the LLC, and it will be an employee identification number of the LLC, and it will own assets. It can own property. It can have all those things. So sometimes, depending on what is best based upon your financial situation, based upon what is from a tax perspective and accounts, that may be an option for you. One thing that I do want to stress is when it comes to a corporation or an LLC, there is a requirement that you have separate bank accounts for your funds. We always want to make sure that we stress that, unlike with a sole prop where cash is coming in and cash is going out, even in your personal bank accounts, one of the two areas that you must stress when it comes to corporations, LLCs, and even partnerships, just for the benefit of the keeping funds separate, is to make sure that your company money does not mix with your personal money.
Commingling, guys.
Right.
No commingling. That is the term. And here it is. It is not a good term. It's not a good term. And we want to avoid it.
Right. The reason in which we really want to make sure that does not happen is that limited liability that we talked about. If the government currently sees those companies as separate and apart from you, if you do start to commingle funds, what they will say is it is not separate and apart from you, and they will do what is known as piercing the corporate veil, which is piercing the protection of limited liability that you have to now make you personally liable for the debts and liabilities of the company, similar to what would be a sole prop.
Right. Okay. And now I want to turn to talking a little bit about not-for-profit organizations and how someone goes about establishing that.
So we love to talk about non-for-profit organizations, but oftentimes we forget that it is still somewhat of a form of a corporation. So even when forming a non-for-profit, what you say is you have to still choose a business entity. So some individuals will still pick a corporation or an LLC, but there are some structures that you need to make sure that you fall into if you're looking for an LLC for that. But a non-for-profit corporation is still a corporation. You then select for the option that the corporation in and of itself is not formed for financial gain. So Basically what that means is at the end of the day, the balance for the corporation, the non-for-profit is zero. You can still pay for salaries, you can have staff, you can do all those things, you have goods and services, but nonetheless, it is not for profitable gain. So all money will somehow go back into the organization. It's great for, as we know, community work. There aren't shareholders really in a non-for-profit, and you select. Usually you will fill out a form of 501c 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, depending on where you fall in the lines. And you will let the government know that we are doing this not for a profitable gain.
Right. So if you have a business idea and your goal is not to earn profit, but to do some good in some way, a not-for-profit organization might be a good option for you. Okay. So you want to talk to us a little bit about the Public Benefit Corporation?
So oftentimes we always see that individuals who really want to do good in the world say, let me just choose the not-for-profit option. I'm not here to make a financial gain, and this is what we want to go for. But we also do know that in the world of not-for-profit, you are heavily reliant on grants or the good resources of outsiders and individuals, and that might not always be a source that is has longevity, right? We're peaks and valleys, and everybody has moments where there's great giving seasons. We always see around the holiday times, or if it's surrounding a particular cause, and then there might not necessarily be. A public benefit corporation actually is a for-profit corporation with a focus and an emphasis on a public benefit purpose. Their actual charters and their documents that are created for their organization are actually defined. They have to actually define what their public benefit purpose is. And so this is a great way if you really have a cause you want to champion for, but you still want to be able to make a profit and have other forms of revenue and resources that a corporation might have. You have this option there. I know it's not spoken of often, and I think that sometimes we believe that in order to be benevolent, you have to not take a profit, but you can actually do good and still make some money when it comes to a public benefit corporation. You would create your structure, everything from even hiring your board members and what they're agreeing to, all of that is defined in your charter and has that public benefit purpose as its focus.
Okay. Well, all of that sounds good. So now I've come into your office. I've told you I'm starting a new business. You've walked me through all of those various options available to me in the state of New York. What do I do next?
So the great thing about New York State is many of the forms that you want to file, depending on which entity you want, are online. Like we have digitized fully. Our Department of Corporations is very organized, very responsive, and we do a very great job of having those forms available and even giving you online walkthroughs. New York City and NewYorkState.gov and the Department of Corporations have very good information for businesses and guides on which you can utilize. One of the things that I always do when a client is coming in is the first thing I ask is, do you have an accountant? You should always have an accountant so you know what you want to do. And many of these fees in which you start this business, with all your filing fees, they can be tax deductible in your first years. So one of the things that you've started a business, or you've thought about starting a business, you've talked about the entities, let's talk about name. We have a conversation about the name in which you're using or you're thinking of using, the brand. One of the biggest reasons are for trademark purposes and for longevity. You want to make sure that you're not going to have a company or a business that is similar or very close to something that already exists. That doesn't help you in the market. That could be likely, consumers or individuals might confuse it with another company. And you really want to make sure you're benefiting from the goodwill that you will be doing and getting from the business that you're starting. So we always want to think about brand awareness when we are discussing your company. So name is very, very important. It can be anything from your grandmother's homemade cookies and what's going on, but it can also be something very eclectic that you're comfortable with. Your name matters, and we want to be able to search that well. The other thing that we always think about is what goods or services, what product or services you will be engaged in. That matters not just for the name reasons, but you also want to know what's in your market, what's happening, and what's already been filed. The Department of Corporations, of course, keeps a record of companies that already exist with the name that you were thinking of, but they also will allow you, depending on what's on there, they'll show you what types of goods or services a company is utilizing. So that's very helpful.
If we're talking and thinking about products and services and we're establishing a new business, are there certain licenses and permits involved with selling certain goods and services that we should be aware of?
Yes, so depending on the types of services you were thinking of outside of your normal filing fees for your articles of organization or your sole proprietorship DBAs or your corporation's articles of certificate of incorporations, you may also need to think of your certificate of authorities, any business licenses that are required by not only the New York State but New York City, and any other licenses and numbers that, if you were going construction, Department of Buildings, everything like that, you should really go down either to one of your local city halls or records rooms, your courthouses. They will give you a lot of the information that you need, or again, NewYorkState.gov, they have an entire section for business owners or individuals looking to start a business, and they actually break things down based upon the categories and the type of goods you are thinking of selling.
Amazing. So let's think of some examples. I'm establishing a hair salon. I go on to the state's website or the city's website. It will tell me what licenses I may need to operate a hair salon.
Yes.
If I'm thinking of operating a restaurant, I go to the same website. It'll spell out the permits, the licenses needed to sell food, for example.
Yes, it'll give you and then it depends, right? Restaurant, street vendor. They'll tell you the types of licenses and permits you might need. It will actually also give you the information of a contact or the department that is best able to help you move forward in your next stage where you should file. It's very good about telling you what fees are associated with it and giving you a breakdown.
Good. So let's talk more about how I'm separating myself from this entity that I am establishing. I don't want to use, I think, my social security number on all of my documents, right, and my bank account, or even my filing. What gets associated with the business?
So the federal government has what is known as an EIN, an employer identification number. You file for that with the IRS, and it's very quick with an SS4 form. And you can, again, all be done online. They will ask you a series of questions, and you will fill those out based upon your company name and everything that what type of structure you are planning on being, and then it will actually automatically generate an online form and an EIN number for you. You can print that out right away, and you can basically now have an identification number for your company that is separate and apart from you. This works for anybody except for a sole prop, because your sole proprietorship, as we noted before, is owned by an individual and is in connection with that individual. So they actually share the same number, which will be your social security number.
Okay. And what can folks expect in terms of costs for obtaining a EIN number?
So an EIN number is free. You can go right online and file for one. There's no cost associated with an EIN number. There are costs associated with the type of entity that you might want in filing those fees, but that varies state by state. One of the things that I did mean to mention is LLCs and corporations and the fees that are set by that are done by state basis. So the joy is in New York State, if you are trying to file an LLC, the first part is a $200 fee plus the cost of publication for an LLC for your articles of organization. And if you are if you are in a foreign or outside of New York State, then there's a little bit of a higher fee for that. Same works for corporations as well.
Fantastic. Okay, so now we've talked about what I'm thinking of naming my business. We've talked about the filing. We've talked about getting an EIN number. What else do I need to think about?
One of the biggest things, and we're bringing it right back, you want to start thinking about finances from the beginning. So it's a good idea to have an accountant. It's a good idea to think about which banks even you want to set up a business account at. One of the main reasons that we always say this is you want a bank or somewhere that works for you, that is comfortable for the types of business that you are having, and also that you have a clearer idea of what is required to maintain those business bank accounts. And the reason I say this is many of those internal documents that we talked about, partnership agreements, access to LLC operating agreements, there are sections in there that discuss your bank accounts, and you want to know that they are in line and nothing is contradicting who or what may have access. And then also, you might want to also consider that because some states require that you open your bank accounts where you have decided to establish your principal place of business with. So where you have initially filed your paperwork, if you've done it in Delaware or you've done it in some other state, you can only be a domestic corporation or a domestic LLC or a domestic partnership in the state in which you filed. Everywhere else or all other states you're considered foreign. Some banks require that you open your business accounts where your principal place of business is.
Okay. Anything else?
We talked about also options if you're going to have payroll or employees, what you may need to do to set that up. If you are talking about profits and losses, you just want to make sure that you're keeping really good accounting records, whether you decide to use a QuickBooks or an in-house method or even Excel, and that's fine. We're starting off and everyone doesn't always have a lot of money. You always want to make sure that you are keeping good records and good books. These things they can be audited, the government likes to know, and you want to make sure that your company is operating in an area that has good record keeping. This helps you down the line, whether you are thinking about grant funding in a non-for-profit, whether you're thinking about venture capital funding for some of these other organizations. Keeping good records and showing that you are profitable or where you are is always something that's going to be helpful.
Fantastic. So thank you so much for that presentation. I hope everyone was able to gain something from it. We are going to open the session now for questions, but I'd like to start this session with a question of my own.
Okay.
So Jameelah, you walked us through the filing process and what's needed. If I just establish a business and I do nothing, I just start selling whatever it is I'm selling or transacting business without, maybe going to the Department of State's website or filing anything. I just run the business out of my home. I collect cash. I have people, Zelle me money or Cash App me money for my services or my goods. What type of business, how would I be classified, right? And what are some of the risks that I'd be exposed to without having, sort of formalized my business?
Oh, so many. More than likely, depending if you're an individual, they will classify you as a sole proprietorship. So what that means is if you're a sole prop, like we talked about, you are personally liable for the assets and the liabilities of the company. So you started doing hair right out your house and you're collecting cash and it's great, but some of the things that people don't necessarily think about is you have people now coming on your property and you now have individuals who are coming for a service and you run the risk of having, somebody gets burned, somebody has they don't like the chemicals you used in their hair. Something happens. They are now injured. If you were a separate entity, that would be one thing. They'd come after or could possibly sue the company. But as an individual, they now can sue you. And so there's the risk of litigation and liabilities there, but then there's also the risk of having people on your property. There's also the risk of the products and services that you have. And if you are collecting income from a service, that is considered business income, you have to report that. So you end up in a scenario where your documents, your tax filings, and that can place you in a different group. So you just want to make sure that you have those things in a row. And of course, we talked about commingling of funds, right? You are exposing yourself. We always call it's risk exposure or liability. You are exposing yourself to an area that you may not necessarily be able to afford. And of course, the city may provide you with fines or other things because you are operating a business without a proper license.
Wow. Okay, I will be coming to you. So again, we are at the question and answers segment of our presentation, and we want to encourage everyone to post their questions, any questions you have, anything you'd like us to go over from this presentation. We're happy to answer questions. I'm also happy to answer questions. Anything you'd like to ask me, I'm available. Feel free to post your questions, guys, and we'll give you everyone a couple moments. Oh, I'm sorry, do we have a question? Is it Cheryl Celeste? Cheryl?
Yeah.
Hi, we can hear you and you are live. Welcome.
Well, I just unmuted it, but I will ask you. What, Eleanor? I just unmuted, but I would ask you. I think I probably missed this part of the presentation. No, informing the corporation. Ellie, you need to go on mute.
Okay.
Thank you. Informing the corporation. Do you have to establish a board of directors or who the secretary and treasurer and so forth? Do you have to establish that?
Yes, for a corporate structure, there must be at least. I'm so sorry. For the corporate.
Yeah, they're having fun over there. Go ahead.
Yes,
Sorry.
for the corporate structure, there must be at least 3 individuals. You usually have a president or a director, a vice president or a VP some way, and the secretary, corporate secretary, and a treasurer. So some people at least 3, because some people may wear dual hats. You may end up with one person that might have one additional role. But the gist is, yes, from a corporate structure area with a corporation, it is more formalized. So they do require that you have a board, because the board will manage the day-to-day activities of that corporation. They will want to know the roles that corporation has. You will usually what happens is corporations have what is known as bylaws instead of like an LLC will have an operating agreement and a partnership will have a partnership agreement. The corporation has formalized bylaws that discuss everything from how shares are sold and given, the roles of each of those directors and corporate officers, how, if you decide to have corporate officers, what the breakdowns are, and then of course, most important is your annual meeting and notice to your shareholders. You are required to give an account and give information to those shareholders about what is happening with the company, because technically they are owners in your company, so you have to report to those stakeholders.
And this is also necessary for a not-for-profit?
So yes, because a not-for-profit is still a form of a corporation. It is just a corporation that is not in existence for personal financial gain. Yes, you must still remain and have at least 3 individuals to form your directors.
Okay, a not-for-profit could be an LLC, an S corp, or
so a not-for-profit may possibly be an S corp, and again, I always say talk to your accountant, because what happens is with an S corporation, there's limitations on the types of individuals that can actually make up that S corporation. So you sometimes see an LLC, which is a limited liability company for tax purposes, opt to be selected as an S corp. However, that S corporation has limitations, which requires you cannot have any more than 100 shareholders. You cannot have you cannot have certain structures, and they have to be from they can't necessarily always be from multiple states. So there are ramifications on choosing that type of selection. So you really want to talk to your accountant or a tax attorney. I always say those, you have both options. To really get an understanding of which type of business entity structure works best for you and the types of goods and services you're going to be providing.
Okay, now, could we come to you to form this corporation?
So
your company, your establishment,
yes, my firm does form corporations or form business entities for individuals. We do usually go through a discussion. I am not an accountant. I will always stress that, and so I usually do like to have a discussion I like to engage in that in discussion with your accountant, because again, many people are like, great, we're going to start this business, cool, and you want to make sure from a financial sense that it makes sense. You might find out that maybe, and we have these things happen all the time, we started as a partnership, but we really think we should change and expand to an LLC, and what that looks like, how that adjusts. So you really want to make sure that we talk to your accountant or tax attorney to say, well, shifting into this type of business entity will then bring about these things that you need to pay for more, or the financial structure will change. You need to make sure these bank accounts are now open. All of those things matter. So yes, my firm does take care of those.
Okay. Do you have can I have your telephone number, because we want to get this established ASAP?
We'll get it to you. We will just have you. Our contact information will be on our last slide. Where's our slide?
Okay.
Yes. And We Attica will also be providing that information for We Attica, so they will be able to get this out again on the rebroadcast.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other questions? All right. It has been so good hearing from everyone. Thank you guys all for tuning in, listening to us, for your interest in our topic. We are going to be bringing more Law and You series to you. We'll be resuming, I believe, in the fall. If anyone has ideas or thoughts on topics, we're happy to hear those. Please connect with us through our social media pages, through We Attica's social media pages. We're happy to take your suggestions.
In addition, let's not forget that Caribbean Legal Solutions is around and will gladly aid and assist you. They have a group of a huge network of attorneys here and, of course, in the Caribbean that will be able to provide you some of the services that we talked about today, and will also be able to give you more of a network for you and your businesses.
Do we have anything else? All right, folks. Well, thank you again. This has been an amazing opportunity. Thank you guys for tuning in. My name is Renee Kendall.
And my name is Jameelah Tucker. Thank you, We Attica, for having us.
Everyone enjoy. Have a good
wonderful evening.
Bye.